Yellow, my friends, welcome to the first installment of the Just Law podcast series, where we talk about law, ethics, and everything in between. I'm your host, Ethan Gao, and today we will discuss crimes and punishment. Well, let's look at the facts. Now, the prefrontal cortex, which is a major component in controlling judgment, impulse control, and decision making, isn't fully developed in a teenager until around they're 25 years old. Now, this area is crucial for weighing consequences, meaning that teens are more likely to act on their impulses without thinking long term. Teens are also less culpable under law, and this was based on science. Now, in a court case, Roper versus Simons in 2005, the U.S. Supreme Court banned the death penalty for juveniles, citing research that minors are less morally responsible due to brain immaturity. Now, this decision was based on neuroscience and psychology, not just ethics. A key quote from the court: "Juveniles are more vulnerable or susceptible to negative influences and outside pressures, including peer pressure." Teens also show heightened activity in the limbic system, which controls emotions and reward seeking. At the same time, their self-regulation systems lag behind, creating a sort of mismatch that leads to risky or violent behaviors in some. Many research studies, such as the Pathways to Desistance study, which contained over 1,300 serious youth offenders, found that most teens who commit violent crimes stop offending by their mid-20s, especially if given the right interventions, such as education, therapy, and mentorship. There are 4 youth rehabilitation programs that show the most effectiveness and the highest success rates. The first one is a cognitive behavioral therapy, which help youth change thought patterns and reactions. The second one is family-based interventions, which help strengthen support systems at home. The third one is education and vocational training, which helps give youth a future to work toward. And finally, substance abuse and mental health treatment, which addresses the root causes of behavior. Now, crimes such as murder, rape, and armed robbery often cause deep and irreversible harm to their victims and families. The severity of these acts doesn't change based on the age of the person committing them. While it's true that teens are still developing mentally and emotionally, that shouldn't excuse serious criminal behavior. Everyone, regardless of age, must be held accountable for the harm they cause. Some argue that harsh sentences for teens are a bit too extreme, but they could serve as a powerful deterrent to others. When young people see that serious crimes carry serious consequences, it may discourage them from making the same choices. Although rehabilitation is important, it should not come at the cost of justice. Victims deserve to know that the legal system takes their suffering seriously, and society needs to reinforce that violent actions have lasting consequences. In 1999, a 12-year-old boy called Lionel Tate was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of his 6-year-old sister. Now, this case was quickly overturned, and his sentence was reduced to 30 years. 30 years. As of right now, Lionel is still in jail because of a crime he committed when he was a teen. On the other hand, teens do have an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex, which is very prominent in decision making. And, a juvenile justice system exists for a reason. They help with rehabilitation. Now, here is my verdict. I personally think that teens should be punished, but not locked away for the rest of their lives. Now, if the crime they commit as a teenager is small, like a little bit of stealing, shoplifting, and the kid, they had no ill intent, they didn't want to hurt anybody, I think the juvenile justice system worked just fine. And even with harsher crimes, such as assault, battery, trespassing, you could put a longer and harsher sentence. But it's really hard to say because, of all the evidence we've talked about, at the end of the day, it's about the teen that's being tried. If the teen shows no remorse, if he or she, did the crime with all of their heart and loved it, shows no sign of stopping, I personally think, the judge should be able to see that this person is a psychopath. There's a psychopath right in front of you. So it generally depends on the teen that committed the crime. For 99% of the time, I think that the teens should not be tried as adults. Even if they commit slightly bigger crimes like assault, they should be put in jail, of course, but like a juvenile system with other juveniles, because at the end of the day, the main thing we want is rehabilitation. And now, if this child is a repeat offender, like they've done the same crime or different crimes over and over again, now it's time for the judges to buckle up the belt, because they look at the kid's records and it says battery 4 times, and now they have attempted murder. This kid's 15, 16. We might have to put them into a adult jail, because if we keep letting this kid go on and on, go back into juvie, back out, back into juvie, it's not going to do him any good. It's not going to do society any good either. So at the end of the day, it really depends on the kid. Now, speaking on the topic of criminal sentences, everyone knows about P. Diddy, right? Sean Combs. And does everyone know about his controversy right now? The baby oil in his closet? Well, why is it that with so much evidence saying that Diddy is guilty, is he still not in jail? Well, that's going to be our next topic, folks. Why do celebrities, and sometimes politicians, often have softer sentences than the regular Joe? Well, before we dive into that, we're going to have a quick ad break. Are you a parent who's worried about their child's growth in academics at school? Well, fear not, because EG Tutoring Enterprises is the exact tutoring company you're looking for. At EG, we turn frustration into confidence, one lesson at a time. Our certified tutors don't just teach, they connect, motivate, and inspire. Whether you're preparing for a big exam, catching up in class, or aiming for the top, we've got you covered. Our main goal at EG Tutoring Enterprises is to provide an education to those who cannot access it. Please keep in mind that this is a student-run company. So, if you're interested in improving your child's academic prowess, then please search up on your browser EG Tutoring Enterprises, or you can shoot us an email at ethanggg223@gmail.com. We hope to see you soon, because together we can make a difference. All right, that was an interesting ad. Are we back? All right, we're back. If you've forgotten what we're going to talk about, our topic is, why do celebrities and politicians often have softer sentences than the regular person? Well, the first conclusion you may come to is, they're rich and famous, the law system's flawed, and they only care if the rich people stay rich and the poor people all go to jail. And if you say that, you could be right, but, there's more complicated and more reasonable ways as to why. And the first contributing factor is, of course, their wealth and what they can do with that wealth. Compare that with, your regular person. They don't have that much money to buy a top defense lawyer, and most people usually have to settle for a public defense person. So, they can't really get the same level of lawyerism, if that's what you called it, compared to a celebrity or a politician. Celebrities and politicians usually have an obscene amount of wealth and money. And using that money, they could buy top legal defenses and good lawyers, plea bargains, bonds, and lighter sentences. And adding on to that, celebrities, they usually have an amazing public image. And if they're faced with a crime case, their fans and social media might, back them up a little bit, say, this person hasn't done that much bad in their past, maybe give them like a lighter sentence. Like you see that all the time on like Twitter and Instagram, like free him, free her. They didn't do nothing wrong. But usually if they don't get that kind of support from a bunch of strangers, they usually receive the same sentence as if they weren't a celebrity. So this factor mainly depends on the popularity and power this person has. And oh my goodness, speaking of power, politicians, this leads more into politicians. They have way more power than like a random person that committed a crime. So behind the scenes, they could pull some strings, make a few phone calls, give some money to the jury, and they could walk off scot-free, where a random person charged with the same crime could get life in prison. And that's just how strong connections are. Like if you're in the public face, you're sitting there in the crime room, you're looking at all this, and they say that he's free or she's free, you might think, oh, it's fine, but behind the scenes, there's many things going on. And so an example of this is Casey Anthony. I know she's not the most famous person. She's not Mark Cuban, but she was pretty well regarded in her town, and she was pretty wealthy too. And I don't know why. Why would you do this? She apparently killed her infant daughter, and in court, she lied several times. And even with all the evidence pointing that she did it, fingerprints, clothing, all of that, the jury found her not guilty. And as a result, she only had to serve 4 years for killing her daughter, alongside a measly fine of $4,000. Like, oh my goodness. You killed your own daughter, and in return, you have to give 4 years. What did they like? The daughter was 4 years old. You only have to serve 4 years for the person you killed. Like, why would you bring them into the world to make them suffer? I just don't know why you do that. First episode of Just a Law podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed that. It's my first time making a podcast, so if it sucks, I apologize, and I hope the next one could make you reconsider listening to my podcast. And hope you guys could like give some feedback, maybe like mic quality or like my speaking, my information, my content. If you guys have any suggestions, please give me an email, egal28@pickeringcollege.on.ca. I'll put it on screen, but if you can't see, EGAO28@PICKERINGCOLLEGE.on.ca. Thank you very much. And remember, this podcast, it's just me, it's just a little side project I've been doing. I'm really into law, so I just really like reading court cases and talking about all these like law and psychology. And it's mainly just my opinion, this podcast. Obviously, I've done my research, but my final verdict is just my opinion. And if you disagree, that's fine. The main podcast is to spread awareness and information to those of you interested in learning more about law. So if you have any questions or thoughts, message me on the email I told y'all. Thank you for listening to Just Law Podcast. I'm your host, Ethan Gao. See ya in the next one. Bye.